What if I told you that fairy tales aren't what they seem? That behind the glittering tiaras, the grand palaces, and the carefully staged photographs of smiling royals lies a story of ruthless ambition, heartbreak, and strategy? What if the love story that captured the world's attention, the American actress who stole the heart of Prince Harry, wasn't destiny at all, but design? That's the story we're about to uncover. And once you see the trail of men left behind, you'll never look at Meghan Markle the same way again. Because this isn't just about Meghan. It's about power. It's about how far someone can go when every decision, every relationship, and every smile is a calculated step on the ladder. And the question we'll wrestle with together is simple. Was Meghan chasing true love, or was she chasing the crown? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now, before you roll your eyes and say, "Oh, here we go, another royal gossip piece," let me stop you right there. This is not about surface-level scandal. This is about patterns. It's about a clear, undeniable sequence of events, boyfriends, husbands, romances, that, when pieced together, paint a chilling portrait of someone who always had her eyes fixed firmly on one thing: more. More status, more influence, more visibility, and yes, ultimately, more power than most of us could ever dream of. But how does one go from a struggling actress on a second-tier TV show to a duchess, shaking hands with heads of state, standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, and rewriting royal history? You don't get there by chance. You get there by climbing. And climbing means using every rung on the ladder, even if those rungs are people. Take a step back with me for a moment. Imagine Meghan in her late teens. She's not yet the polished, media-savvy duchess the world knows today. She's just another college student at Northwestern University, wide-eyed, ambitious, hungry for opportunity. But even then, according to people who knew her, she wasn't the type to sit back and hope life happened to her. No, she was the type to make life happen. She knew what she wanted, and she was already scanning the horizon for who could help her get it. Her first serious boyfriend? A basketball star. Not just any student, but someone with talent, stature, and attention. That choice alone tells you something. Because while love is beautiful, attraction is powerful, and ambition is even more magnetic. And from there, Meghan's pattern would only sharpen. Actors, producers, chefs, and finally, royalty. Each one with something to offer. Each one a stepping stone. But here's where it gets interesting. Meghan wasn't just dating these men. She was absorbing from them. She was taking the access, the experience, the connections, and transforming herself. Think about it. Every failed relationship wasn't a setback. It was a lesson. Every heartbreak wasn't a dead end. It was a redirection. Every man was both a partner and, knowingly or not, a stepping stone towards something greater. And let's pause for a moment here. Ask yourself, have you ever known someone like this in your own life? Someone who always seemed to find the right person at the right time? Someone who could walk into a room and walk out with not just a phone number, but an opportunity? That's Meghan. She's not just charming. She's strategic. But this isn't only a personal story, it's a cultural one. Because Meghan didn't just climb through Hollywood and then stumble into Windsor Castle. No, she played a game older than any crown, older than any Hollywood studio, the game of reinvention. And every single chapter of her life shows us how she mastered it. Let's be honest. Meghan Markle is not the first woman to be accused of ambition in relationships, and she won't be the last. But what makes her story different, what makes it so gripping, is the scale. She didn't stop at a boyfriend who could get her into a few Hollywood parties. She didn't stop at marrying a producer who could help her career. She aimed at the top of the world's most visible, most powerful, most scrutinized family. And she got there. But how? That's the million-dollar question. How does someone go from a college romance to standing hand-in-hand with Prince Harry on the steps of St. George's Chapel? Cameras flashing. Millions watching. What did she give? What did she take? What did she sacrifice? And most importantly, was it worth it? We're going to break this down piece by piece. From Steve Lepore, the college basketball star who thought he was just dating a girl next door, to Sean Zakin, the aspiring actor whose career couldn't match Meghan's hunger. From Brett Ryland, who turned away from Hollywood, to Trevor Engelson, the film producer who gave Meghan her first taste of real access and paid the price in divorce. From Corey Vitiello, the chef who fed her heart and gave her stability, to Prince Harry, the ultimate prize. Every single relationship tells a story, and when you line them up back to back, the picture is too clear to ignore. But here's the twist. Meghan's climb isn't just about men. It's about media. Because Meghan knew something that most people in Hollywood never figure out. That fame isn't given, it's built. That your name doesn't just appear in lights, you put it there. And sometimes, the fastest way to build your own brand is to attach it to someone else's. And she did that, over and over again. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds cold. That sounds calculating. And maybe it is. But let's not kid ourselves. Isn't that what Hollywood is built on? Isn't that what politics is built on? Isn't that, in some way, what the world itself rewards? The ability to turn relationships into opportunities? Meghan just happened to take it further than anyone else dared. So, why does this story matter right now? Because Meghan Markle isn't just a royal wife. She's a cultural flashpoint. She represents ambition, reinvention, controversy, and rebellion. She walked into the most traditional, rigid institution on earth, the British monarchy, and she walked out on her own terms. And whether you see her as a victim, a villain, or a visionary, one thing is undeniable. She knows how to win. But every victory comes at a cost. Broken relationships, burned bridges, tabloid wars, a family divided. And still, the question lingers. Was it love, or was it strategy? As we journey through this story, chapter by chapter, we're going to uncover not just who Meghan Markle dated, but what each man reveals about her path. We're going to connect the dots in a way the headlines never have. And by the end, you'll have to decide for yourself, was Meghan Markle simply a woman in love? Or was she playing the most sophisticated long game we've ever seen? And before we dive into the first chapter of this saga, let me leave you with this thought. Fairy tales always end with happily ever after. But Meghan's story doesn't. Because for her, the question was never about the ending. It was always about the climb. And the climb begins where most fairy tales do, with a young woman, a campus romance, and a man who thought he'd found love, when in fact, he was just the first rung on Meghan Markle's ladder to the crown. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the first love of your life wasn't just a romance, but the first rung in someone else's ladder? That's exactly the question hanging over Meghan Markle's very first known boyfriend, Steve Lepore, the college basketball player who unknowingly became the opening act in a drama that would one day end on the steps of Windsor Castle. And while Steve might have believed he was simply dating a pretty, ambitious freshman, the truth is that this short-lived love story marked the beginning of a pattern that would follow Meghan all the way to royalty. Think back to Northwestern University in the early 2000s. The campus is buzzing with energy. Students are chasing degrees, chasing dreams, chasing the rush of independence. Meghan, a young theater student, is just starting to carve out her path. She's got charisma, she's got ambition, and she's got her sights set on more than just textbooks. Enter Steve Lepore. Steve wasn't just any student. He was an athlete, a rising star on the basketball court. Tall, talented, and popular, he carried the kind of presence that drew attention wherever he went. For a young Meghan, who already understood the value of association, dating Steve wasn't just about romance. It was about visibility, status, access. Now, let's pause and ask a question. Why do people gravitate towards certain partners in their youth? For most, it's simple: chemistry, comfort, companionship. But for someone like Meghan, who biographers describe as ambitious even in her teenage years, could it have been more than that? Could Steve have been the first test subject in a lifelong experiment of social climbing? The two met during Meghan's freshman year. According to royal biographer Andrew Morton, the pair were quite the couple. Think about that phrasing. Not just a couple. Not just they dated. No, quite the couple. Even then, Meghan had a way of turning heads, of transforming a simple college romance into something people noticed. That's important, because from the very beginning, Meghan wasn't just living life, she was curating it. Their relationship lasted about 5 months. Just long enough to make a splash, not long enough to define her. But in those 5 months, Meghan got a taste of what it meant to be associated with someone in the spotlight. Steve was a college athlete, after all, and athletes, especially basketball players, were campus celebrities. Meghan wasn't just another freshman anymore. She was the girlfriend of a star. But then came the twist. Steve transferred to a college in North Carolina. Just like that, the romance was over. A young love cut short by geography. For Steve, maybe it was bittersweet. For Meghan, perhaps it was simply a stepping stone lost to distance. She didn't dwell. She didn't crumble. She moved on. And that, right there, is telling. Most people experience their first serious breakup and take time to lick their wounds. They cry. They replay every detail. They stall. But Meghan? She pivoted. Quickly. Strategically. Almost as if she knew that Steve wasn't the destination, just the beginning of the journey. And here's where we uncover the first clue about Meghan's future patterns. She chose Steve not because he was ordinary, but because he was extraordinary. An athlete. A standout. Someone with visibility. And when that door closed, she didn't settle for less. No, she sought out the next man who could match or surpass what Steve had offered. Think about that. Isn't it fascinating how her love life seems almost like a resume? A progression. Each man offering something new. Each relationship building upon the last. And Steve? He was the opening line. Now, let's humanize this for a moment. Steve Lepore himself went on to live a quiet life outside of the royal glare. He didn't become a Hollywood star. He didn't marry into royalty. He became a coach, a mentor, a man respected in his own right. And in many ways, he dodged a bullet. Imagine being the what-if boyfriend of Meghan Markle, the one the world forgot because he wasn't part of the bigger story. Sometimes anonymity is a blessing. But for Meghan, anonymity was never enough. Their romance might have ended with Steve's transfer, but it lit a fuse. A realization. Relationships could be more than emotional. They could be transformational. They could shape her image, elevate her status, and accelerate her climb. And let's not overlook the timing. Meghan was in her formative years, just beginning her theater degree. She was learning how to perform, how to command attention, how to play roles both on stage and off. And in Steve, she had the perfect rehearsal partner. Their romance was her first performance, her first taste of playing the role of someone's girlfriend in a way that mattered to others. And if college taught Meghan one lesson, it was this: people notice who you're with. That's a lesson she would carry forward time and time again. So, what can we take away from Meghan's first romance? That even in her earliest years, there was no such thing as coincidence. Steve wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a signal of who Meghan would align herself with in the future. Men with visibility, with influence, with potential. Now, ask yourself this. Was Meghan just another freshman in love, or was she already testing the waters of a lifelong strategy? Was Steve simply a young man caught up in a fleeting romance, or was he the first rung on Meghan's carefully constructed ladder? One thing is certain. When Steve left for North Carolina, Meghan didn't hesitate. She didn't cling. She didn't follow. She let him go, because she knew that her next chapter was waiting. And that next chapter would reveal even more about the kind of woman Meghan Markle was becoming. Because while Steve Lepore was the college sweetheart, Meghan's next relationship would take her beyond the basketball courts and into the heart of Hollywood ambition. And what came next would not only confirm the pattern, it would raise the stakes. Because Meghan wasn't about to date just another athlete. She was about to date a man who dreamed of the spotlight, just like she did. And together, they would write a new script, one that Meghan would ultimately rewrite for herself. But who was he? And what did he reveal about Meghan's hunger for more? The answer lies in the story of Sean Zakin. And that story is where things really begin to heat up. What if your college romance wasn't just a fling, but a rehearsal for something much bigger? For Meghan Markle, her next relationship after basketball star Steve Lepore wasn't just about companionship. It was about alignment, about testing the waters of Hollywood ambition, about finding a partner who didn't just shine on a court, but under a spotlight. Enter Sean Zakin, the aspiring actor who, unknowingly, became the second act in Meghan Markle's long climb toward the crown. Let's set the scene. The year is 2003. Meghan is deep into her theater studies at Northwestern University. By now, she's gained confidence, her voice, her stage presence, her ability to command attention. She's no longer just the freshman testing out life at a new school. She's sharpening her tools. She's rehearsing not only for stage roles, but for life itself. And then comes Sean. Sean Zakin wasn't just another student. He was a fellow dreamer. Someone chasing the same elusive stardom Meghan wanted. Someone who understood the language of auditions, rejection, and ambition. According to those who knew them, their relationship lasted around 6 months. Short, but not insignificant. Because this wasn't just about romance. This was about synergy. Think about it. Meghan had just stepped away from Steve Lepore, the college athlete. That relationship gave her a taste of visibility, of what it felt like to stand beside someone admired by many. But athletes live in one world, Hollywood in another. And Meghan's true north was never the basketball court. It was the camera, the script, the role, the red carpet. And in Sean Zakin, she found someone walking that same path. So was it love? Was it ambition? Or was it both? Imagine Meghan and Sean together. Two young performers running lines late into the night, swapping stories about casting calls, fantasizing about where their careers would take them. There's an intimacy in that, a bond that goes beyond dinner dates and campus strolls. They were collaborators in ambition, co-stars in the making. But here's the twist. While Sean may have seen Meghan as a fellow traveler, Meghan may have seen Sean as a mirror, a reflection of her own hunger. Because if Steve Lepore had shown her the power of visibility, Sean Zakin showed her the power of alignment, what it meant to partner with someone who shared your goals, your dreams, your drive. And yet, as quickly as it began, it fizzled. 6 months. That's all. Why? Well, look at the trajectory. Sean went on to build a respectable career, landing roles in shows like Sex and the City and Mystery Girls. He became a screenwriter, a man who carved out a space for himself in the industry. But Meghan? Meghan wasn't satisfied with respectable. She wanted iconic. She wanted unforgettable. And if Sean couldn't provide that, if his career couldn't match her vision of the future, then he couldn't be the partner she needed. Now, some might call that cold. Others might call it practical. But remember the lesson from Steve Lepore. Meghan didn't dwell on endings. She pivoted. Efficiently. Cleanly. Almost ruthlessly. And so, what began as a partnership of equals, a young man and woman chasing the same dream, ended as just another stepping stone. Sean carried on, building his career outside the royal spotlight. Meghan carried forward, refining her strategy. Here's the fascinating part. If you trace Meghan's relationships, you see not just romance, but escalation. From an athlete with visibility to an actor with ambition, Meghan was leveling up. Each relationship wasn't random, it was progressive. It was calculated. And here's where we need to pause and ask the audience a tough question. Have you ever known someone who seemed to treat life like a chessboard? Someone who never moved without thinking 3 steps ahead? Was Meghan falling in love? Or was she making moves? Because every move tells us something about the player. Sean Zakin may not have been Meghan's forever, but he was proof that she wasn't just looking for love. She was looking for momentum. And when Sean couldn't offer the velocity she craved, she moved on. But don't misunderstand this. Meghan wasn't heartless. To dismiss her as some icy manipulator is to miss the complexity. Meghan felt. Meghan loved. Meghan wanted connection. But she also wanted more. And time and again, when forced to choose between comfort and ambition, she chose ambition. And maybe that's not betrayal. Maybe that's bravery. Maybe it's a quality we secretly admire in others, but resent when it threatens our illusions of romance. Because Meghan wasn't waiting for life to hand her a script, she was writing her own. And Sean Zakin? He was simply cast in a supporting role. Their breakup was quiet. No tabloid headlines. No public fallout. Just 2 young actors parting ways, moving down separate paths. For Sean, it was a chapter closed. For Meghan, it was another rehearsal, another lesson, another step forward. But here's where the story takes a sharper turn. Meghan's next relationship wouldn't be with a fellow dreamer, someone still clawing their way up the Hollywood ladder. No, she was about to make a leap, from an aspiring actor to a man who would one day become a Hollywood writer for one of TV's biggest shows. A man named Brett Ryland. And unlike Steve or Sean, Brett represented something different. Something bigger. Something Meghan couldn't ignore. Because Meghan was done rehearsing. She was ready to step onto the main stage. And that's where the real performance would begin. What happens when a woman leaves the safe bubble of college and steps into the real world? For most people, it's a time of uncertainty. New jobs, new cities, new identities. For Meghan Markle, it was also a time of new men. Men who weren't just companions, but catalysts. And the first of these was Brett Ryland, the post-graduation boyfriend who revealed once again that Meghan's love life was never just about romance. Let's rewind. Meghan has graduated from Northwestern University. She has a theater degree in hand, the sparkle of ambition in her eyes, and the daunting reality of life beyond campus staring her down. This is where most young actors stumble. The auditions, the rejections, the endless waiting tables. It's a grind that breaks more spirits than it builds careers. But Meghan wasn't about to let herself become another statistic of failed Hollywood hopefuls. She wanted more. She needed more. And that's where Brett Ryland came in. Brett wasn't just another struggling actor. He was charismatic, charming, and most importantly, connected to the entertainment industry. He had aspirations, yes, but also a foothold, a sense of direction in an industry where most wander blind. For Meghan, fresh out of school and still shaping her trajectory, Brett was both comfort and compass. Their relationship lasted around 5 months, brief but revealing. Because this wasn't a casual fling. Meghan had just left behind Sean Zakin, the fellow actor whose ambition matched hers but whose career lacked momentum. Brett, on the other hand, was different. He wasn't just dreaming of success. He was beginning to carve a path toward it. Eventually, Brett would go on to work as a writer for Two Broke Girls, one of the most successful comedies on network television. He'd later pivot out of the entertainment world entirely, transforming himself into a business consultant for social media firms. But at the time Meghan dated him, Brett represented something powerful, potential. Think about the timing. Meghan had just graduated. She wasn't tethered to a campus or a city. She was free to move, to mold herself, to chase opportunities wherever they appeared. And in Brett, she found someone who mirrored her own transitional state, ambitious, restless, hungry. So what drew Meghan to Brett? Was it love? Chemistry? Or was it, once again, the strategic allure of being with someone who had a foot in the door of an industry she desperately wanted to enter? Here's the thing about Meghan. She was never careless. Every relationship she entered seemed to have a purpose, a function. With Steve Lepore, it was visibility. With Sean Zakin, it was alignment. And with Brett Ryland, it was trajectory. Meghan wasn't just collecting boyfriends. She was collecting lessons. Each one brought her closer to the life she wanted. But here's the cruel irony. While Brett would eventually step away from the entertainment industry, Meghan was doubling down. She was sharpening her craft, hunting for auditions, taking small roles. For her, acting wasn't a stepping stone, it was the dream. For Brett, it was just one chapter in a longer story. And that divergence may have been their undoing. Because for Meghan, the goal wasn't stability, it was acceleration. And Brett, talented though he was, wasn't accelerating fast enough. He was a good man, but he wasn't the man. And so, just like Steve and Sean before him, Brett became another closed chapter. Another rung on the ladder Meghan was climbing. Now, let's pause and ask a provocative question. How many of us have ended relationships not because the other person was bad, but because they weren't enough? Because they couldn't match our vision of the future? It's a brutal truth, but it's human. And Meghan, more than most, had a crystal clear vision of what she wanted. And here's where the Meghan Markle story starts to shift gears. Up until now, her relationships had been short, formative, relatively low stakes. College boyfriends, aspiring actors, men who mattered in the moment but faded in the long arc of her journey. But Meghan was about to cross a threshold. Her next relationship wouldn't be with another aspiring actor or young professional. It would be with someone who could give her real access, real influence, real connections. Because Meghan Markle's next man wasn't just another rung on the ladder. He was the ladder itself. His name? Trevor Engelson, a Hollywood producer. A man who could open doors Meghan had only dreamed of. A man who would, for a time, become her husband. And Trevor wouldn't just change Meghan's career. He would change her destiny. But what Meghan gave to Trevor, and what she took from him, would set the stage for one of the most dramatic transformations in modern celebrity history. And it all began in a bar in 2004, when the ambitious young actress met the man who would make her Mrs. Engelson and eventually her ex-wife. But if Trevor thought he was Meghan's happily ever after, he was gravely mistaken. Because for Meghan, Trevor Engelson was never the ending. He was just the beginning of Act Two. Every great story has a turning point, a moment where everything changes. For Meghan Markle, that turning point wasn't meeting Prince Harry. It wasn't even joining the cast of Suits. No, her first great pivot came years earlier, when she locked eyes with a man in a bar in 2004. His name was Trevor Engelson. And unlike the boyfriends who came before him, college athletes, aspiring actors, Trevor wasn't another dreamer. He was a doer, a man with power, a man with Hollywood credits to his name, a man who could offer Meghan what no one else had before: access. Let's set the scene. Meghan is in her early 20s. She's out of college, hustling in Hollywood. Like so many hopefuls, she's grinding through auditions, landing small parts, doing whatever it takes to stay afloat. These are the character-building years, the years that either make or break an actor. For many, this stage lasts forever. But Meghan? She had a shortcut. Trevor Engelson was that shortcut. Trevor wasn't A-list famous, but he was connected. A film producer with legitimate credits. His projects included Remember Me, a drama starring Robert Pattinson, and later the FX series Snowfall. He wasn't Spielberg. He wasn't Scorsese. But in Meghan's world, he was a gatekeeper. And Meghan knew what to do when she met a gatekeeper: step through the door. The two hit it off quickly. Trevor was older, more established, and carried the confidence of a man who could make things happen. Meghan, on the other hand, was charming, ambitious, and eager. Together, they made an attractive pair, a budding actress and a Hollywood insider. To outsiders, it looked like love. To insiders, it looked like strategy. But let's not strip the romance away completely. Meghan and Trevor did fall in love, at least in the way two ambitious people in Los Angeles fall in love. They shared chemistry, opportunity, and a drive to succeed. And for Meghan, Trevor wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a ticket into the Hollywood machine. By 2010, Trevor proposed. He popped the question during a trip to Belize, a picturesque backdrop for what seemed like a fairy tale moment. For Meghan, it was another box checked. Ambitious actress? Check. Industry insider fiancé? Check. The wedding followed in 2011, set against the sandy shores of Jamaica. It wasn't a stiff, formal affair. No, Trevor and Meghan's wedding was wild. A 4-day party filled with drinking, dancing, and revelry. Guests described it as a blur of laughter, sun, and celebration. For a brief moment, Meghan Markle had it all: love, luxury, and legitimacy. She was Mrs. Engelson, wife of a Hollywood producer. But here's the cruel irony. Just as Meghan's career began to rise, her marriage began to fall. Let's examine this carefully. Meghan landed her breakout role as Rachel Zane on Suits in 2011, the same year she married Trevor. Suddenly, she wasn't just hustling for bit parts. She was on a hit cable show, filming in Toronto, gaining recognition. Her star was climbing. And when one star rises, sometimes another fades. Trevor, still grinding as a mid-level producer, couldn't match Meghan's ascent. He wasn't suddenly more powerful, more visible, or more glamorous. He was steady, reliable, but perhaps no longer enough. And here's where the cracks began to show. Meghan was filming in Toronto for much of the year, while Trevor remained in Los Angeles. Long-distance marriages are difficult for anyone, but when you add in ambition, fame, and ego, they become nearly impossible. Meghan was evolving, polished, poised, stepping into celebrity. Trevor, meanwhile, stayed behind the scenes. Their worlds began to diverge. By 2013, whispers of trouble began circulating. Meghan, it seemed, was outgrowing Trevor. She was no longer the young actress who needed a producer to open doors. She was opening her own. And in 2014, the inevitable happened. The couple divorced, citing irreconcilable differences. But those close to them told a different story. Friends described the split as sudden, even cold. Meghan reportedly sent back her wedding rings by mail, a gesture some interpreted as shockingly detached. For Trevor, it was a devastating blow. For Meghan, it was simply the next move. Here's the question that lingers. Was Trevor Engelson ever really Meghan's forever, or was he just another rung on the ladder? Consider this. During their marriage, Trevor gave Meghan small opportunities, like her cameo in Remember Me as a bartender. But once she landed Suits, she didn't need Trevor in the same way. Her career was independent now. Her visibility was her own. And Trevor, for all his Hollywood credits, couldn't keep up. And so, like Steve, like Sean, like Brett before him, Trevor was left behind. But unlike the others, Trevor had been Meghan's husband. He had invested years, not months. He had believed in a shared future. And when it ended, he was left not only heartbroken, but humiliated. Let's pause here for reflection. Isn't this the moment that defines Meghan Markle's story more than any other? The willingness to cut ties when a relationship no longer served her trajectory. The courage or coldness, depending on your perspective, to walk away from stability in pursuit of something greater. Because Meghan wasn't finished. Far from it. Trevor Engelson was the end of Act 1 in her story. Divorce wasn't a setback, it was a reset. And Meghan, ever the strategist, was already preparing for her next move. But fate is strange, isn't it? Because the very act of leaving Trevor, of liberating herself from a Hollywood marriage, set Meghan on the path that would eventually lead her to royalty. First, though, there would be another man. A man who wasn't a producer, an actor, or a basketball star. No, her next partner was something different entirely, a chef. His name was Corey Vitiello. And while he wouldn't become Meghan's husband, he would play a crucial role in her transformation from actress to duchess. Because sometimes, the road to the crown runs through the kitchen. And that story begins next. For Meghan Markle, her next great romance after her divorce from Trevor Engelson wasn't with an actor or a producer. It wasn't with a man who lived behind the camera or on the big screen. It was with a chef, a man who, for 2 years, offered her stability, companionship, and a taste of the normal life she seemed to crave, if only briefly. His name was Corey Vitiello. And while history may have relegated him to a footnote in Meghan's story, the truth is that Corey was the final chapter before everything changed. Let's set the scene. The year is 2014. Meghan is newly divorced. She has walked away from Trevor Engelson, severing ties with the Hollywood world that once defined her. She's in Toronto, filming Suits, building her brand, and stepping into a new stage of independence. For the first time in years, Meghan is untethered. And into that moment of freedom walks Corey. Corey Vitiello wasn't just any chef. He was a celebrity chef, well known in Canadian culinary circles, with a reputation for talent and charisma. He had restaurants. He had recognition. He had the kind of local fame that made him a perfect companion for someone like Meghan. Visible, respected, but not overwhelming. For Meghan, Corey offered something none of her previous partners had: stability wrapped in sophistication. Their relationship lasted about 2 years, from 2014 until 2016. That's not a fling. That's a serious relationship. Long enough for routines to form, for families to be introduced, for futures to be imagined. And in that time, Meghan and Corey became a fixture in Toronto's social scene. She was the TV actress on the rise. He was the chef with flair. Together, they were glamorous, enviable, and seemingly content. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because even in her domestic moments, even in her quieter chapters, Meghan was never far from ambition. She was building her lifestyle blog, The Tig. She was cultivating her image on social media. She was networking, traveling, aligning herself with charities and causes that expanded her reach. Corey provided comfort, but Meghan was always looking beyond. And maybe that's why, in hindsight, their relationship feels less like a love story and more like an interlude, a pause between 2 acts of a much larger play. Let's talk about Corey himself for a moment. By all accounts, he was a gentleman, charismatic, generous, and devoted to his craft. After their breakup, he spoke of Meghan with grace, saying, "I've got a lot of respect for Meghan. She's a great girl. There is no bitterness." That statement alone tells us something. Corey wasn't bitter because Corey understood. He knew Meghan was destined for something larger, even if he wasn't part of it. And that raises an important question. Was Corey Vitiello ever truly Meghan's destination? Or was he simply her rest stop? Think about it. Meghan had just left behind a marriage that ended with bitterness and distance. She didn't want chaos. She didn't want another Hollywood scramble. She wanted grounding. Corey gave her that grounding, stability, respect, and affection. But Meghan was never meant to stay grounded. She was meant to soar. And here's where the twist comes in. Because while Meghan and Corey were together, Meghan's world was shifting in ways neither of them could have predicted. She was gaining traction as an actress. She was being noticed not just as Rachel Zane on Suits, but as Meghan Markle, lifestyle influencer, philanthropist, and rising figure in her own right. Her star wasn't just rising, it was accelerating. And Corey, for all his talent, wasn't accelerating at the same pace. Their breakup in 2016 was quiet. No drama. No public war of words. Just a clean split. with both parties moving on respectfully. But the timing is what makes this chapter extraordinary. Because shortly after breaking up with Corey, Meghan was introduced to Prince Harry. Think about that for a moment. One day, Meghan Markle is dating a Canadian chef. The next, she's being set up with one of the most eligible bachelors on the planet. A man who was not just wealthy, not just famous, but royal. That's not just a step up. That's a quantum leap. And this is where the pattern becomes undeniable. Meghan didn't linger in endings. She didn't wallow in heartbreak. She pivoted, swiftly and decisively, to the next chapter. And with Harry, that next chapter wasn't just another rung on the ladder. It was the crown itself. But let's not forget Corey's role in all this. He may not have been the prince, but he was the bridge. He was the man who allowed Meghan to recover from her divorce, to ground herself in normalcy, to rebuild her life after Trevor. Without Corey, Meghan might not have been ready to step into the global spotlight. Without Corey, Meghan might not have been prepared for Harry. And maybe that's why Meghan has never spoken ill of him. Because Corey wasn't a mistake. He was a necessity. He was the final rehearsal before the biggest performance of her life. Now, let's ask the question that lingers. Did Meghan know, even while dating Corey, that she was destined for more? Did she sense that her future wouldn't be defined by Toronto restaurants and Canadian domesticity, but by castles, crowns, and controversy? We may never know for certain. But what we do know is this. Meghan didn't stay still for long. She never has. And as soon as her relationship with Corey ended, fate, or strategy, brought Prince Harry into her orbit. And that's where everything changed. Because Meghan Markle's story wasn't about to remain in Toronto. It wasn't about to remain on the small screen. It was about to leap onto the world stage. And when Meghan met Harry, it wasn't just love at first sight. It was destiny, or perhaps the most carefully executed move of her life. But was it true love, or the ultimate strategy? The answer begins in 2016, when Meghan Markle was introduced to the prince who would rewrite her story forever. And that story begins now. Imagine this. The world's eyes are on a young prince, the second son of the most famous royal family on the planet, known for his charm, his wild escapades, and his relentless media scrutiny. Now imagine a woman stepping into that orbit, someone who, until recently, was living a relatively ordinary life, building a career as an actress, navigating love, and trying to find her place in the world. That woman is Meghan Markle. And the prince? He's Prince Harry. The first question that pops into your mind is obvious. How did Meghan, an American actress, divorced, and navigating the complexities of her past relationships, end up meeting a British royal? Was it fate, chance, or strategy? The answer is a blend of all three. In 2016, a mutual friend made an introduction, low-key, private, away from prying eyes. No tabloids, no paparazzi, no public speculation. Just a setup between two people who, on paper, seemed worlds apart. Meghan had the charisma, the intelligence, and the ambition. Harry had the title, the wealth, and the fame. But what drew them together, initially, was not just status. It was a shared understanding of life under the microscope. Harry knew what it was like to be constantly observed, analyzed, and criticized. Meghan knew what it was like to be judged, to have every move dissected, every relationship commented on, and every career choice scrutinized. They recognized a reflection of themselves in the other. Someone who could survive the pressures of public life without losing their essence. From the first encounter, something clicked. But it wasn't instant fireworks, not in the cliched sense. Their connection was subtle, layered, and electric. They started communicating, getting to know each other carefully, almost cautiously. And yet, there was an undercurrent of inevitability, a sense that their paths were meant to converge in ways neither could predict. Let's pause and consider Harry's situation at that time. He had been in highly publicized relationships before, including with Chelsea Davy and Cressida Bonas. Each romance had ended under intense media scrutiny, leaving Harry wary, protective, and increasingly disillusioned with the dating world. Enter Meghan, a woman who didn't immediately fall into the royal mold, who had lived outside the gilded cage of privilege, who spoke her mind and carried herself with grace. She intrigued him. She challenged him. She wasn't just another celebrity girlfriend or someone trying to carve out a niche in his world. She brought her own world, her own intelligence, and her own voice. And Harry, recognizing both her strength and vulnerability, responded in kind. Now, here's where the story becomes fascinating. Their relationship didn't start with a grand public declaration. In fact, the first months were almost invisible. They were careful, strategic even, shielding their connection from the relentless paparazzi. They were conscious that the world would soon take notice, that every gesture, every glance, every interaction would be dissected and debated. But they persevered, building a bond away from the glare of the media spotlight. And then, Meghan did something remarkable. She accompanied Harry to the 2017 Invictus Games, making their first official public appearance together. The moment was electric. The world had been watching, waiting, and suddenly, Meghan Markle was no longer just an actress from Toronto. She was Harry's partner, his equal, his future queen. Cameras flashed, social media exploded, and gossip columns ignited. The narrative was already forming. A royal prince had met an American divorcee, and the world wanted to know everything. But here's the twist. Even with all the glamour, all the headlines, the attention, and the scrutiny, Meghan and Harry's relationship wasn't merely a fairy tale. It was also a high-stakes venture. Every choice, every public appearance, every interview carried consequences. Meghan wasn't just dating a prince. She was entering a centuries-old institution, one filled with tradition, protocol, and expectations she had never encountered before. And yet, she navigated it with precision. Every move was deliberate, every smile calculated, every appearance a demonstration of poise and understanding. To the outside observer, it seemed effortless. To those paying closer attention, it was strategy in motion, careful, measured, and ultimately transformative. Now, let's circle back to a provocative question. Was Meghan in love with Harry, or was Harry the ultimate prize in her ascent? The answer, as with much of her story, is not black and white. Love and ambition often coexist, intertwined in ways that can be difficult to untangle. Meghan undoubtedly had feelings for Harry, but she was also aware of what their union represented, a leap into history, a move into a sphere of influence and visibility unlike anything she had known. And Harry, for all his royal charm, was equally captivated by Meghan, the woman, the intellect, the presence, the energy that had carried her through Toronto, Hollywood, and beyond. Their engagement was announced on November 27, 2017, a date that would mark the beginning of a global spectacle. The world watched as Meghan Markle transitioned from actress to duchess, from private citizen to figure of international intrigue. And in that moment, the questions and debates that had followed her throughout her life only intensified. Was this love? Was it ambition? Or was it a combination of both? A partnership that blended emotion and strategy in equal measure? One thing is certain, their union was transformative. Meghan was no longer simply Meghan Markle. She was now part of the British royal family, carrying a title, public expectations, and responsibilities that would reshape her life forever. And Harry, too, was changed, drawn into a relationship that would challenge norms, confront centuries of tradition, and ultimately alter the course of his royal path. But the story doesn't end there. Because while the world celebrated their romance, while headlines proclaimed a modern fairy tale, the pressures began to mount. Scrutiny intensified. Expectations grew. And what had begun as a private courtship soon became a global conversation about privilege, ambition, and the intersection of love and power. And this is where the cliffhanger lies. Meghan had climbed the ladder, met the prince, and stepped onto the world stage. But the question remained, could she survive the pressures of royalty? Could she navigate the centuries-old institution that had never seen someone quite like her before? And more importantly, what came next would test everything, her resilience, her strategy, and the very essence of who she was. Because meeting Prince Harry wasn't the end of Meghan Markle's story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would captivate the world, spark debate, and leave an indelible mark on history. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a ring, a single, sparkling object that would ignite global obsession. But the story behind that ring was far more complex than the press would ever reveal in headlines or magazine spreads. When Prince Harry knelt before Meghan Markle, announcing their engagement on November 27, 2017, It seemed like the culmination of a fairy tale romance. But the reality behind the scenes was a perfect storm of strategy, anticipation, and relentless scrutiny. The engagement wasn't just a romantic milestone. It was a seismic shift in the royal narrative. Meghan, an American actress, divorced and accustomed to navigating Hollywood's glare, was about to enter the British monarchy, a world steeped in centuries of tradition, expectation, and protocol. And Harry, the young prince whose life had been defined by media attention since childhood, was stepping into a public stage even bigger than he had ever known. The announcement was carefully orchestrated, almost cinematic in execution. Buckingham Palace, the press, and royal communications teams coordinated every detail. Meghan and Harry knew every word that would be said, every photograph that would be taken, every glance that would be captured for global audiences. They had rehearsed moments that millions would dissect, and yet, amidst the preparation, there was genuine emotion. Imagine the pressure. Cameras flashing, journalists leaning in, microphones poised to catch every utterance. This wasn't just an announcement, it was a test. And Meghan, who had previously mastered the scrutiny of Hollywood, rose to the occasion. She appeared poised, radiant, composed, and utterly unshakable. The smile, the calm, the subtle glances, everything broadcast confidence, intelligence, and an unmistakable sense of self-possession. And then, the ring. Designed by Harry himself, it included diamonds from Princess Diana's personal collection, ensuring that Meghan's engagement was not only personal, but symbolically entwined with Harry's family history. Every detail, from the choice of stones to the cut of the band, was deliberate. It was a message. Meghan Markle was entering the royal family. Yes, but she would do so on her terms, while honoring the past. But not everyone received the news with celebration. Critics were immediate, vocal, and relentless. Questions swirled. Was Meghan the right choice? Would an American, a divorcee, truly fit into the rigid structures of the British monarchy? Was this a love match or a modern celebrity fairy tale designed to captivate the public? Tabloids thrived on controversy, dissecting her past relationships, her career, her every social media post, and even her skin tone. The scrutiny was fierce and the backlash relentless. Yet Meghan did not falter. If anything, the engagement amplified her presence, her influence, and her ability to command attention. She became a global figure overnight, a symbol of a modern monarchy in a world hungry for representation, empowerment, and new narratives. And Harry? He embraced the choice, standing beside Meghan with unwavering support, signaling that his love, and perhaps his rebellion against royal convention, was unshakable. Consider the cultural context for a moment. A divorced American woman, of mixed race, entering a centuries-old British institution? It was unprecedented. It was also audacious. Meghan's very existence challenged expectations, norms, and assumptions about who could, or should, marry into royalty. Her engagement wasn't just personal. It was political, cultural, and symbolic. Every decision, every statement, every appearance would be scrutinized through multiple lenses: gender, race, class, and tradition. And the media frenzy only intensified when details of the courtship began to leak. Reporters, eager for a sensational story, traced Meghan's past relationships, her Hollywood career, and her personal history with an almost predatory zeal. Headlines ranged from the flattering to the inflammatory, often questioning her motives, her character, and even her suitability for royalty. But Meghan, trained by years in the public eye, navigated the storm with a combination of grace, intelligence, and controlled defiance. Let's pause here and examine a crucial moment. The announcement interview, conducted with BBC, where Meghan spoke candidly about her relationship with Harry. Every word was deliberate, yet natural, balancing transparency with dignity. The world saw a woman unafraid to articulate her values, her emotions, and her commitment. And in that moment, Meghan wasn't just Harry's fiancée. She was a public figure in her own right, capable of influencing opinion and commanding respect. But there was a hidden tension. For every supportive voice, there were critics ready to undermine her every move. Rumors, innuendos, and subtle attacks tested Meghan's resolve. She had navigated Hollywood, certainly, but the monarchy operated differently. Here, The stakes were higher, the traditions deeper, and the critics more entrenched. How she would respond in this environment would define not just her engagement, but her entire tenure as a member of the royal family. And then came the wedding plans. Invitations, venues, dress fittings, and public appearances, all orchestrated with meticulous attention. But behind the scenes, Meghan was navigating personal and cultural adjustments, adapting to royal etiquette, media protocols, and the expectations of a family steeped in centuries of tradition. Every interaction, from staff members to public officials, required diplomacy, awareness, and precision. Yet, despite the immense pressure, Meghan's star power only grew. She was photographed, admired, and analyzed across every continent. Fashion magazines highlighted her style. Talk shows debated her influence. Social media platforms erupted with memes, posts, and discussions dissecting everything from her dress choice to her demeanor. She was, in every sense, a global phenomenon before she had even walked down the aisle. And here's the twist. While the world focused on the glamour, the engagement was also a test of endurance. Meghan and Harry were under unprecedented scrutiny, their every move documented, analyzed, and judged. And as engagement preparations continued, the pressures mounted, not just from the media, but from within the palace itself. Traditionalists, advisors, and even distant family members watched every decision with skepticism. Would Meghan adapt? Could she survive the invisible and visible forces working against her? The engagement, which should have been a celebration of love, became a crucible. It revealed the challenges of stepping into an ancient institution while maintaining personal identity, values, and independence. And it foreshadowed the coming storm. The relentless, unforgiving media attention and royal protocol that would test Meghan's limits in ways no Hollywood set ever could. And yet, Meghan navigated each step with poise. Every interview, every public appearance, every subtle gesture was calculated yet genuine, blending diplomacy with authenticity. She was rewriting the narrative in real time, asserting herself as both partner and individual, navigating love, ambition, and public perception in equal measure. But as the wedding date approached, there was an underlying question that no one could answer. Could Meghan maintain her identity, her autonomy, and her resilience once she fully entered the royal family? Or would the centuries-old institution swallow her, as it had done with others before her? And what unseen pressures were about to surface, testing her in ways even the tabloids couldn't predict? Because while the engagement was celebrated worldwide, it also marked the beginning of an unrelenting storm. A storm that would shape Meghan's life, Harry's life, and the monarchy itself. The global fascination, the love story, and the media frenzy were just the beginning. And the cliffhanger that would set the tone for everything to come? The wedding, the fairy tale everyone expected, would soon reveal cracks, tensions, and conflicts that nobody saw coming, and would forever alter the course of Meghan Markle's life. May 19th, 2018. The day that the world thought would be a flawless, storybook wedding. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle exchanged vows at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, watched by millions across the globe, and celebrated in a spectacular pageantry that seemed to rival even Hollywood's grandest productions. But behind the pristine flowers, the carefully curated guest list, and the smiles for the cameras, there was a deeper story. A story of strategy, adaptation, and a woman stepping into an arena that had rules she would soon learn to bend. From the start, this wedding was never merely a romantic celebration. Every element was deliberate, every detail meticulously planned, and every move executed with precision. Meghan, having been raised in a world of entertainment and public performance, approached the wedding with a mindset that combined personal expression and calculated foresight. This wasn't simply about love. It was also about positioning, perception, and the beginning of a legacy she intended to carve. Consider the symbolism in every choice. Meghan's dress, designed by Claire Waite Keller, wasn't just elegant, it was understated power. Its simplicity challenged centuries of royal expectations, reflecting a modern, confident woman who would not be overshadowed by tradition. Even her veil, embroidered with flowers representing every nation of the Commonwealth, signaled awareness of her role as a figure of global influence. Every stitch carried meaning, every design choice sent a message. And the guest list? carefully balanced between royals, celebrities, and close friends from her Hollywood life. It wasn't merely a gathering of people, it was a demonstration of influence, relationships, and networks. The very presence of certain celebrities served as a reminder that Meghan brought her own power to this union, blending two worlds that had rarely intersected so publicly. The ceremony itself, while appearing effortless, was layered with calculated optics, camera angles, public visibility, and the choreography of royal protocol were executed to perfection. Meghan's every gesture, from her entry down the aisle to the delicate clasping of Harry's hand, was observed and analyzed. In real time, the world debated everything. Was Meghan poised enough? Was Harry's affection genuine? Was the monarchy prepared to accommodate this unprecedented modern bride? And then, the vows. Words that, on the surface, conveyed love, devotion, and partnership. But beneath them, the subtle signals of alignment, commitment, and negotiation. A wedding is not merely a celebration of romance. It is also a declaration of intent. Meghan was communicating, subtly yet unmistakably, that she would step into this world with agency, not subservience. Harry, in response, was asserting both personal and public support, signaling that their union would redefine expectations of royal partnership. But the story didn't end at the ceremony. The reception, the speeches, and the public appearances in the days following were equally strategic. Meghan's smile, her engagement with guests, and her graceful navigation of the media landscape reinforced her image as poised, confident, and deeply capable of handling the pressures of royal life. Yet, for all the glitz, the fairy tale imagery, and the celebration, cracks were forming beneath the surface. Even within the palace, traditionalists were uneasy. Meghan's independence, modern worldview, and assertive demeanor challenged long-standing norms. Advisors, staff, and even senior family members began to recognize that this union, while celebrated publicly, was quietly shifting the power dynamics within the royal household. Meghan wasn't a passive participant in this marriage. She was actively shaping it, influencing decisions, and redefining the boundaries of royal life. Meanwhile, the global media narrative oscillated wildly. One day, Meghan was praised as a modernizing force, a fresh breath in a centuries-old institution. The next, she was criticized, her every action scrutinized, her motivations questioned. The press dissected her American upbringing, her past relationships, and even her approach to motherhood. The scrutiny was relentless and intentional. For Meghan, navigating these forces required a level of emotional intelligence and strategic foresight few could match. And yet, amid the whirlwind, Meghan displayed an uncanny ability to balance personal authenticity with public expectation. She smiled when cameras were present, engaged meaningfully with dignitaries, and managed the enormous pressures with the composure of someone accustomed to public performance. Every moment was calculated yet felt genuine, creating a complex persona that the world found captivating and controversial. But what about the tensions behind the scenes? Staff members, palace aides, and even distant relatives quietly observed Meghan's assertiveness with suspicion. Questions circulated. Was she too independent? Was she willing to challenge long-standing traditions? Could the monarchy truly accommodate a woman who refused to fit neatly into its preordained molds? Meghan's choices were not mistakes. They were intentional recalibrations of power, influence, and perception, and they did not go unnoticed. Consider the global implications. For millions of women, Meghan became a symbol of agency and possibility. She represented a modern narrative of influence, choice, and ambition intersecting with tradition. And yet, the royal establishment, steeped in centuries of precedent, was being asked to accept change not gradually, but immediately. Every glance, every handshake, and every speech became a public litmus test of acceptance, resistance, or challenge. Even the media's response revealed deeper truths. Journalists, editors, and commentators were caught between fascination and skepticism. Meghan was a study in contradictions, approachable yet distant, authentic yet strategic, relatable yet aspirational. For every flattering profile, there was a critical op-ed. For every fan applauding her style, another questioned her motives. And through it all, Meghan remained the focal point, commanding attention while navigating forces few could survive unscathed. And then, there were the rumors, subtle, insidious, and unverified, about palace dynamics, staff tensions, and internal disagreements. Meghan's assertiveness, while celebrated by some, threatened traditional hierarchies and protocols. Each decision she made, each interaction she initiated, became fodder for speculation. Would she survive the scrutiny? Could she assert influence without alienating allies? Or would her independence, so vital to her identity, eventually trigger resistance from an institution unaccustomed to challenge? Despite all the external pressures, the wedding itself was a triumph of public perception. Millions watched, applauded, and celebrated a narrative carefully crafted to balance tradition and modernity. And yet, the private reality hinted at the challenges to come. Meghan had entered the royal family not simply as a bride, but as a catalyst for change, an agent whose influence would ripple through the monarchy, media, and public discourse in ways that were only beginning to emerge. And the cliffhanger? The fairy tale wedding, the smiles, and the public celebrations masked the underlying tensions that would soon explode. Meghan's integration into royal life was far from smooth, and the challenges she would face, from media scrutiny, family expectations, and institutional resistance, were only just beginning. What seemed like a perfect day, a seamless union, and a storybook romance was in fact the opening act of a saga that would shock the world, redefine the monarchy, and test every limit of Meghan Markle's resilience. The world applauded the wedding, but behind closed doors, the true story, the struggles, the negotiations, the subtle battles for agency, was unfolding. And what came next would reveal just how strategic, resilient, and influential Meghan really was, and how far she would go to carve her place in history. Stepping into the palace is like stepping onto a stage with no script. Every gesture, word, and glance is scrutinized. Every mistake is amplified. And for Meghan Markle, this world of centuries-old tradition, rigid hierarchy, and unspoken rules was both intoxicating and treacherous. From the outside, her life seemed perfect, married to a prince, adored by fans, photographed in gowns and tiaras. From the inside, the story was far more complicated. The first shock came immediately. The palace, with its sprawling halls and ceremonial grandeur, is not merely a home, it is an institution. An institution built on rules, protocols, and history that stretches back centuries. Every member of staff, every aide, every advisor had a role, and every role came with expectations that could crush even the most confident outsider. Meghan quickly realized that charm and poise, so essential in Hollywood, were not enough to navigate this labyrinth. Even the simplest tasks required guidance. How to greet family members, how to address senior royals, even how to respond to cameras in corridors. Protocol dictated everything, and yet the palace also expected authenticity. It was a paradox, to be herself while suppressing certain instincts, to act natural under constant observation, and to assert influence without overstepping invisible boundaries. The tension was compounded by the media. From the very beginning, Meghan became a lightning rod for global attention. Every outfit was analyzed, every appearance dissected, every interaction with Harry catalogued. Headlines ranged from celebratory, praising her fashion sense and modern approach, to vicious, questioning her intentions, her personality, and even her background. Rumors spread faster than truth, and the lines between fact and fiction blurred almost immediately. Palace staff, long accustomed to the public eye, were not always supportive. Whispered complaints, subtle exclusions, and passive resistance became part of Meghan's daily reality. She was no longer in a world where charisma and networking alone could shield her. She had entered a world where tradition often trumped individuality, and history dictated the rules. Each day was a delicate negotiation between maintaining her identity and adapting to an institution resistant to change. The conflicts were both personal and professional. Meghan's assertiveness, which had served her well in her acting career, was now perceived differently. Decisions that might have been considered confident and decisive outside the palace were sometimes interpreted as overreach. Staff who were protective of the institution viewed her moves with suspicion. Allies were scarce, and even Harry, supportive though he was, could not shield her from every tension. And then there was the unrelenting media storm. The tabloids, particularly in the UK, were merciless. Stories circulated about Meghan being difficult, demanding, or manipulative. The coverage often relied on unnamed sources, blending fact and rumor in a way that made it nearly impossible to respond without creating additional headlines. Even mundane events, such as Meghan attending a charity event or choosing a particular designer, became fodder for debate, criticism, and moral judgment. Meghan responded strategically. She had learned early in life how to navigate public attention, and now she applied those lessons on a grand scale. Carefully curated public appearances, deliberate messaging, and selective engagement with the press allowed her to maintain some control over her narrative. Yet, even with strategy, the pressure was immense. Every action was magnified, every decision questioned, and every misstep could be weaponized against her. The conflicts extended beyond media scrutiny. Relationships within the palace, particularly with other senior royals, were complex. Meghan's approach, direct, candid, and sometimes confrontational, clashed with traditional expectations. Meetings were often tense. Conversations were loaded with subtext. And the weight of history, of centuries-old family dynamics, hung over every interaction. Meghan had to balance loyalty to her husband with her own agency, all while navigating an environment that could be both supportive and hostile in the same breath. The stakes were further complicated by the public's expectations. Meghan was not just a duchess, she was a symbol. For women, for Americans, for those fascinated by the monarchy, she represented a modern approach to an ancient institution. But symbols are fragile, and the higher the expectations, the greater the scrutiny. Every decision had implications far beyond the palace walls. Meghan was learning, quickly, that influence in the public eye could be both empowering and perilous. Yet, despite the tension, Meghan demonstrated resilience. She leaned on her support network, including Harry, trusted advisors, and close friends outside the palace. She cultivated an understanding of palace dynamics, observing carefully, learning who to trust and when to push forward. Her Hollywood experience, which had taught her to manage criticism, control perception, and assert her narrative, became an invaluable asset in navigating the royal labyrinth. And there were moments of triumph. Meghan brought fresh energy to traditional royal engagements, combining empathy, professionalism, and authenticity in a way that resonated with the public. Her charitable work, particularly around women's empowerment and social justice, drew admiration. Public appearances were designed to highlight both her individuality and her role as a royal. Each success reinforced her position, even as challenges persisted behind closed doors. But the palace, for all its grandeur, could be unforgiving. Protocol breaches, perceived oversteps, or even subtle deviations from tradition were magnified. Meghan's presence disrupted a delicate balance, and not everyone was willing to adapt. Gossip spread quickly, and alliances formed and dissolved as the pressures of public life intensified. Every day was a careful dance between influence and caution, between asserting agency and preserving relationships. Meanwhile, the media narrative continued to escalate. Stories ranged from questioning her character to speculating on her motives. Comparisons to previous royal wives were inevitable, and Meghan was constantly measured against historical precedents she could never fully emulate. The scrutiny became almost claustrophobic, a pressure cooker in which every decision carried enormous weight. And then there was the personal toll. Behind the polished appearances and public smiles, Meghan was dealing with immense stress. The challenges of adapting to a foreign institution, managing constant scrutiny, and navigating interpersonal conflicts took a psychological toll. Reports of anxiety, isolation, and emotional strain surfaced. Yet, outwardly, Meghan maintained poise, continuing to project confidence and strength to the world. But perhaps the most profound challenge was the realization that the palace was not a static institution. It was a living organism, shaped by history, politics, and personalities. Meghan, as a new entrant, had to navigate not only the present but also centuries of tradition, unseen hierarchies, and complex social dynamics. Her actions, intentional or not, triggered reactions that rippled through the institution, creating friction, tension, and, ultimately, transformation. The cliffhanger? Life inside the palace was proving to be far more complex, stressful, and confrontational than anyone outside could imagine. The media storm was only intensifying, internal conflicts were escalating, and Meghan's every move was scrutinized. She had survived Hollywood, navigated international fame, and mastered public perception, but the palace posed an entirely new challenge. And what came next? The choices she would make, the alliances she would forge, and the battles she would confront would redefine her place in history, test her resilience, and shock the world in ways that no one could have predicted.